Welcome to the Lunch and Learn podcast from the National Fire Chiefs Council to share knowledge and lived experiences on topics about equality, diversity and inclusion. We hope to create a momentum of learning, and we ask you to share widely with your friends and colleagues. Today, Nikki and Anna from Kent Fire and Rescue Service shared bite-sized techniques to avoid burnout, increasing understanding how practical tools and techniques help our day-to-day life, can contribute to the fire and rescue services meeting the needs of employees and communities.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session, which is around bite-sized techniques for avoiding burnout. Clearly, some people be eating their lunch, which is absolutely fine, as this is a Lunch and Learn. So, firstly, thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We hope you find the session useful. If it's your first time, a very warm welcome. If you've joined us previously, welcome back. It's our fourth Lunch and Learn session, and we've had some fantastic feedback so far, and I'm sure that today will be no exception. I'll shortly introduce Nikki and Anna from Kent Fire and Rescue Service. My name is Carl Bozeman. I'm an Assistant Chief Fire Officer with Cleveland Fire Brigade, and I'm absolutely delighted to be a member of the NFCC EDI board and the EDI project, which supports the People programme. Now, as some of you may know, the NFCC EDI project is led by Johnson, who's the Chief Fire Officer of South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, Penny Newton, who's the Senior Project Manager, and Nikki Thurston, who's our EDI Technical Lead, and you probably see Penny on the call today. What we're trying to achieve as part of the EDI project, well, it's about driving best practice into everything that a fire and rescue service does and into the NFCC initiatives and the governance. And effectively, we're going to achieve that, or we are achieving that, by building a hub of best practice tools and guidance, building networks, which is part of what we're doing today as the Lunch and Learn sessions, collecting and using data and research, which will help us to evidence and evaluate what we do in relation to EDI. And there are 4 work streams. The first one's outreach, data, EDI hub, and research, which cover the main areas of interest within EDI. Each work stream is led by a senior colleague from across the sector with a strong interest in EDI, and you may well have seen some of the products and best practice that we've shared so far from the EDI project, and in particular the NFCC Equality Impact Assessment training. Some of you may have taken part in that, and you'll be aware that there is a template available now for services to use. Some of you, and most of you hopefully, will have seen the Equality of Access documents. First 3 have been published. EDI Forum, we had our first EDI Forum, which was fantastic. There's some further dates to be confirmed for later in the year, and I think we're talking the next one will be around June. And also an EDI calendar, which is currently being populated, but that's going to have dates of a significant EDI events and things that you can get involved in so that we can take a consistent approach to sort of supporting and promoting EDI. So hopefully that just gives you a bit of an overview as to where we've come from, why we're here today, which leads us nicely onto today's Lunch and Learn session, which is around preventing burnout. For most of us, work takes up a huge amount of our day, and how we are feeling day to day can really affect our health and well-being. However, help is at hand in the form of, and I'm delighted to welcome Nikki and Anna from Kent Fire and Rescue Service, who have kindly offered to share their interest in wellbeing and people today. Now, both Nikki and Anna will introduce themselves, but they have a strong background in people and organisational development, along with a particular focus on preventative wellbeing. And we'll hopefully have a short period for questions at the end. We will try and stick to the hour, mindful of people's busy schedules. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Nikki and Anna for today's Lunch and Learn. Thank you, Nikki and Anna. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you. That's a lovely introduction. What we've got to share today is just some really simple, easy, everyday tips that you can just incorporate in day-to-day life that can make a real difference to boosting your mood and your resilience. We live in a really, really stressful world, and it's important that we take time for self-care. Today's session is going to have a very brief look back over the past year and everything that's gone on for us, and we look at how that might have affected some of our well-being, how we might have felt a bit off kilter, and we'll also look at what we can do to reduce some of that going forward. So my name is Nicola Williams, and today I am co-facilitating a session with my colleague Anna Lee. We work in learning and organisational development for Kent Fire and Rescue Service. We're super interested in people, looking after our people. We've got a big emphasis on well-being at the moment in our service, and we were asked whether we could put on some sessions to help support our people as we navigate ourselves through the pandemic and make sure that we stay resilient. So we were delighted to do that, and we're really pleased to share this with you today. Okay, let's get started. What a year we've lived through. It's been really interesting, unusual, and something we in our lives have not experienced before. The global pandemic goes without saying, but in addition to that, we've had lots of other stuff going on. There's been various global disasters, not to mention the fact of Brexit and the coverage of the US elections. And my goodness, when we look back, doesn't it just feel like we've all been experiencing such uncertainty? And on top of that, many of us have been working from home, juggling our work commitments with our personal commitments, and that's all melded into the environment of our homes. We're trying to juggle that with childcare, homeschooling. We might have caring responsibilities and partners who are working from home too. Perhaps you've been supporting a partner or a family member who's been furloughed at various points, and you might have had additional worries about income or making ends meet. The list of stuff that we've got just goes on, and it can really feel like we're starting to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. And when we look back on this past year, take one moment right now just to recognise that you have kept it all going. We've all kept as a normal service as possible in these very strange circumstances that we've been in. So take one moment right now to think back on everything you've achieved and just feel really pleased about it and really proud about that. Because regardless of how you might have felt about the various stages and movement that we've had between going into lockdown and coming out and the evolving government messages that we've been hearing over the past year, you may have seen things like working from home as a novel opportunity. Maybe you've been afforded the chance to get things done without the usual interruptions. Equally, it might have filled you with dread. The thought of working alone without maybe your team in such easy and personal reach. You might have felt indifferent about it all, but it's quite possible you felt a range of different moods and like a pendulum of moods and outlooks as we've just been trying to navigate ourselves through this past year. And all of these feelings are completely valid. Rather than perhaps having one staunch preference for any singular way of working, we might be a bit more like the tide. We might ebb and flow as we're just trying to get through each day. And of course, with keeping everything as normal as possible, juggling our demands and recognising our own feelings, it feels like nothing around us has really lessened. Perhaps, if anything, everything's just felt busier and maybe a bit more chaotic, and everything around us has amplified a bit. Earlier on, if you cast your mind back a year, we were encouraged to adapt and overcome. We had pub online quizzes, Zoom parties. Joe Wicks was encouraging us to exercise daily. Online concerts, we had more and more stuff to give us structure and fill our time when we couldn't go out, intended to keep us busy and to keep us occupied. But when did you last really unwind? Because although they're going to be coming back, those dim and distant carefree holidays currently are just that at the moment. And those are the times when you're much more likely to really unwind and switch off more. Our plans are on seemingly indefinite hold, and it feels like everything's just gathering dust, awaiting for the time that we can get back out. But until that time, though, until we get that sense of normality resuming, we perhaps all need to make sure that we're really looking after ourselves a bit better so that we can reduce the possibility of stress building up and avoid getting to that stage of burnout. And perhaps the last year has just left us all feeling a bit fatigued and a bit stressed. Maybe, we're feeling those senses of burnout and we're hearing that phrase a lot more. Over the past year, have you experienced feeling stressed, or maybe that sometimes everything's just felt a bit too much? We've all definitely had periods of feeling that way, and the good news is that today's session is going to look at how we can reduce some of those feelings of stress. But equally, it's really nice and important to know that we've all been experiencing very similar things. We haven't been alone throughout this. So today's session is going to give us some tips on how we can recognise the signs of prolonged stress, and we're going to look at how we can use some really simple self-care tips to avoid getting to burnout. If we can do that, we're going to reduce our stress and increase our resilience. Because we've come to realise that what we're going through is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And maybe that initial burst of energy and that effort that maybe we all put in a year ago at the start of this, the things that we threw ourselves into wholeheartedly, just isn't sustainable at the pace we've been going at. And the obvious analogy about endurance is a marathon runner. They typically prepare and train for months, running hundreds of miles, resting, recovering, and nourishing their bodies and minds to set them up for success. They've got mental and emotional support, people cheering them on, and giving advice if they notice that they're falling behind. And the main focus for most marathon runners is on getting through, not getting fast. And it's the same in the way we approach our work and home lives. If we're doggedly just trying to meet our goals, work hard from the moment we switch on until the moment we switch off, we are going to start feeling exhausted. So let's think about burnout. What is it? How does it feel? And what are the signs? Exhaustion, yeah. Like you can't face the next thing, absolutely. Emotionally drained and can't sleep. Feeling like you're buried, feeling like your head's exploding, absolutely. Fed up, helpless. These are all quite good characterizations of what burnout actually is. And essentially, burnout is what happens when you try to avoid being human for too long. The World Health Organization has identified burnout as a syndrome that's linked to chronic stress. Our work and our life events and our commitments can make us all feel like we're drowning under everything that needs doing. And this chronic stress it's prolonged, it's intense, and it's exhausting. And that can leave us feeling demotivated, emotionally drained, cynical, and depressed. And if we stay in the chronic stress zone for too long, that's when we can start to experience burnout. And burnout has three elements. It's feelings of overwhelming mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion, and that's caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So that might look like not being able to think straight or think straight at all. Could be unusual changes in mood and behavior and feelings of hopelessness. Another strand of burnout is mental detachment from our work and life aspects. You feel like nothing you do makes a difference or is appreciated. It's a sense of you feeling overwhelmed and finding it hard or impossible to keep personal or work commitments. At this stage, you might become socially withdrawn or isolated. And the third strand of burnout is poor performance. You're not meeting your goals. It's mainly affecting everyday tasks at work, and you feel quite negative about those tasks. It can manifest as a difficulty in concentrating, a lack of creativity, or a decline in productivity. All that stuff comes into play here. And our personality traits and our thought patterns, such as whether we feel like we're perfectionists, the passion and drive that we have for our work, or whether we view life as with a glass that's half full or half empty, that can all contribute to whether we're likely to experience burnout, as well as some of the lifestyle choices we make. What we do in our downtime and how we see the world can play just as big a role in causing overwhelming stress as work and home demands. Burnout's often linked to work, but in today's world, we're overwhelmed with too much choice and relentless access to information from television, social media, the news channels, and there's always that sort of background pressure and ideals about who and what you should be to live your best lives. And these everyday pressures can all add up and affect our stress levels, and that upsets our healthy balance, meaning that we need to identify what stress is to avoid getting to the stage of burnout. So how do you know if you're really on the cusp of burnout or if you're just going through a challenging month? It's important to note that some stress is important and anxiety is what motivates us to do well. Sometimes we need a burst of stress to kick us into action or spur us on to reach our goals and deadlines. But long-term, sustained stress can be really hard on your health, and it can lead to burnout unless you start to manage it well. It's when we're continually exposed to stress and anxiety that we're not letting go of, that's when that can lead to burnout, and we get those feelings of mental detachment, continued exhaustion, or lower or absence of productivity. Stress can be as a result of built up small pressures sustained over time, or it could perhaps be one big traumatic life event that can feel very stressful. So if stress leads to burnout, and we've talked about some of what burnout looks like, too much to do, procrastination, unable to function. If stress leads to burnout, what does continued stress feel like? How does that manifest for you? What stress feels like when it's continued and ongoing? No end in sight, says Neil. Yeah, you're not wrong there. Long dark tunnel, immensely overwhelming. Yes, definitely. Symptoms of depression. I think that's absolutely right. Prolonged stress can affect how we feel, how we behave, and it can manifest itself physically. We might feel irritable, aggressive, and impatient. And signs of stress here include feeling continually anxious, nervous, and afraid. Our thoughts might be racing and we just can't switch them off. And it affects our behaviour. That behaviour might manifest as constant worry, We might be finding it much harder to make decisions. We're snapping at people more, and perhaps we're eating too much or too little. We might be also indulging in some of those more unhealthy habits that we like to do, smoking and drinking being the obvious ones. And other manifestations of our behaviour can be that we can start to become too restless, and we might find ourselves being tearful and crying a lot more. Stress manifests physically as well. We could be breathing far too shallowly or hyperventilating. If we're feeling stressed, we might feel that muscle tension carried somewhere in our bodies. Just think about, for you, when you're feeling stressed, where does that tend to sit in your body? For me, it's always in my shoulders, and I find I'm grinding my teeth a lot. And other manifestations of stress include things like sleep problems, panic attacks, sexual dysfunction, constant tiredness, and chest pains. So if we don't manage our stress well, we are possibly heading on that road to burnout. So it sounds like stress and burnout feel really similar, right? But there are some distinct differences. So stress involves too much, too many emotional, physical, and mental demands. Stressed people imagine that if they can just get everything under control, then they're going to feel better. On the other hand, burnout is about not enough. It's about feeling empty and mentally exhausted, devoid of motivation and beyond caring. And people experiencing burnout don't often see any hope of positive change in their situations. If excessive stress feels like you're drowning in responsibilities, then burnout is a sense of being all dried up. And whilst we might usually be aware of being under a lot of stress, we don't always notice when burnout happens. So we need to take some action before we get to that stage. So if you're feeling any of these, now is the time to reach out and get some support from your service. So to help us undo some of this stress, we're going to share 3 top tips with you that you can build really easily into your day. And that just requires conscious small changes in your life that will really help you feel a difference. You have got no massive habit changes here that require lots of conscious thought and effort. So do you remember our marathon runner from earlier, and that this was all about endurance? It was about how we nourish ourselves so we can sustain a healthy life balance that's going to help maintain our emotional and physical selves for the long game. And we can do that through 3 ways. And that includes refueling, making sure we re-energize, and we recharge ourselves. So you've no doubt heard a lot about how diet can help us maintain good mental and physical health. We hear things like you should avoid too many stimulants, cut back on caffeine and alcohol, and we often hear, don't we, about how important it is to have a healthy, balanced diet. Let's take a closer look at how some of our diet can affect our sense of well-being, both physically and emotionally, with this short fact or fiction quiz. And I'm going to hand over to Quizmaster Anna right now with the first question. Let's begin.
Love it. Thanks, Nikki. So, number 1, some fats can protect heart and brain health. Fact, or we're getting fact in. Oh, everybody knows their fats. Lovely. So it really is, in fact, a fact. So fats can be really confusing because there's lots of different types of fats, and we hear good and bad things about fats, don't we? The thing is, our bodies really do need some fat for energy, just so that we can absorb vitamins. And our brains also need fatty acids such as omega-3 and omega-6 to keep it working well. And these fatty acids play a vital role in emotional and physical health, such as boosting your mood, increasing well-being, and fighting fatigue.
Okay, great start, people. On to question 2. The only reason for eating enough fibre is to keep regular bowel movements. Is that fact or fiction? You're right, people. This is, in fact, a fiction. Yes, fibre offers a healthy and effective way to stay regular, but that's not the only reason we need to include more of it in our diets. It can contribute to good heart health by lowering bad cholesterol, and that can help regulate your blood sugar levels to help maintain your body's fat-burning capacity and avoid those nasty insulin spikes that can leave us feeling drained and craving unhealthy foods. Eating plenty of fibre actually can also really help move fat through your digestive system at a faster rate so that less of it can be absorbed. And when we fill up on high fibre foods, such as fruit, we'll also have a lot more energy for exercising. And of course, we know how good that can make us feel after we've had a good old workout.
Okay, so 3, calcium's most important role is keeping our bones strong and healthy. Is that a fact or a fiction? Right, well, it is, in fact, fiction. So as well as using calcium to build healthy bones and teeth, calcium also sends messages through the nervous system to help your blood clot, your muscles contract, and also to help regulate your heart's rhythm. And a calcium deficiency can contribute to things like mood problems such as irritability, anxiety, depression, and difficulty sleeping. And calcium is used by almost every cell in our bodies, and things like vitamin D, K, and magnesium need it to be able to absorb themselves into the body. So over to question 4.
Thank you, Anna. So it's a really important part, and I never knew actually how much it can contribute to how we feel as well, and our mood and our outlook. Brilliant. Penultimate question, fact or fiction? Having sufficient levels of protein in your diet can contribute to improving both mood and cognitive function. Is that fact or fiction? Okay, so I can tell you now that is a fact, and we've made this quiz far too easy. Because when we eat protein, it's broken down into amino acids, and they're the building blocks for growth and energy. The amino acid tryptophan influences mood by producing serotonin, and that can reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety and improve our overall cognitive function, as well as boosting our resistance to stress. Final question.
Okay, so carbohydrates should be avoided. Is this a fact or is it fiction? It is, in fact, fiction. So we hear a lot of mixed messages about carbs, don't we? We hear things about good carbs, we hear bad carbs, and we hear about those things quite often. And did you know that our brains use 20% of all our energy to fuel muscles and maintain body temperature? And this is supplied by glucose, which we get from carbs. So to help us keep operating optimally, we need the right type of carbs in our diets to fuel our bodies and to allow us to concentrate and focus.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for participating. That's the end of fact or fiction. And this quiz really was just for fun, but it highlights how what we eat and drink doesn't just affect our waistline and what goes on inside our bodies. It has a really pivotal part in affecting our mood and our outlook and our resilience for dealing with stress, for avoiding burnout. And like our marathon runners, we need to nourish and support our physical selves to sustain us over the long game. So our next tip for nourishing ourselves is to re-energize. We've all heard the saying that laughter is the best medicine. Well, it really, truly is good for you. When we reflect on the past year, it might not feel like there's been that much to laugh about. But maybe it's about creating and finding those small opportunities to see the lighter side of life. We all know the benefits of physical exercise. It helps our bodies and our minds feel good. Well, laughter is an excellent stress reducer that has really good physical and mental effects. It's good for our souls. But did you know it actually has some specific benefits? It's got physical benefits for us. As well as relieving physical stress and tension in the body, laughing can help improve our body's circulation and it can help our muscles to relax. And the effects of that can last for up to 45 minutes after you've had a jolly good laugh. As well as reducing stress, it can increase our energy and help us stay focused to accomplish more. Laughter stimulates your internal organs, and that's because a good laugh enhances that intake of oxygen-rich air, and that stimulates your heart, your lungs, your muscles, and increases the feel-good endorphins that are released by your brain. And endorphins can temporarily diminish our perception of pain and protect against stress. Laughter boosts our immune systems because it decreases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and it increases our immune cells and infection-fighting antibodies. And when we lighten the burden of stress, we know we feel much more resilient. And the link between laughter and mental health is that it stops distressing emotions. You can't feel anxious, angry, or sad when you're laughing. It can also really help you get out of your head and away from your troubles. And of course, as well as providing some of these unexpected benefits, it really can help our relationships by triggering positive feelings and emotional connection. It unites us in times of difficulty and helps us create really strong bonds that buffer against stress and enhance our resilience. And there's ways that we can bring more laughter into our lives. You don't need to be a natural-born comedian to find moments of laughter. And when we feel stress, it's the first thing that disappears. So when you hear it, move towards it. Because more often than not, people are really willing to share something funny because it allows them to laugh again. Try and spend time with fun or playful people, the people who laugh easily at themselves and at life's absurdities, because laughter is such a natural, innate part of us. Think of a baby, smiling within the first weeks of life and laughing within the first few months. So if you've got kids, make time to share their joy the next time you notice them laughing and smiling. It really will bring you joy too. And if you're not naturally a humorous person, it doesn't really matter because you can still find it in the things that you enjoy doing. And that might just be a funny box set, it could be your favourite meme channel on the socials, or a funny book. And if you can't find the funny, that's okay too. Maybe it just starts with a smile, because even that's powerful. Science has shown that the mere act of smiling can lift mood, it can lower stress, and it boosts our immune systems. And that's because when you smile, the brain sees muscle activity and assumes that humour is happening. And your brain is a sucker for a grin. It doesn't distinguish between whether you're smiling because you're genuinely joyous or just because you're pretending, but the effects are noted. Smiling during brief stressors can help reduce the intensity of your body's stress response, regardless of whether you're actually feeling happy, and it can trick your brain into happiness. And another really powerful way that we can re-energize ourselves is through taking micro breaks. So, what does taking a micro break mean to you? Do you take them? Feel free to share in a chat what a micro break actually means. 5 minute stop, says Neil. Chill in. Yes, Gary. A certain amount of minutes with a cuppa in the garden. Love that, Faye. Definitely. Change of scene as well, hey? Music, a walk, a few minutes feeding the fish. We all know that we need to take regular breaks to keep our energy levels high. It also, making sure we take breaks, means that we don't start traveling down that road towards burnout. And micro breaks are frequent short breaks, like up to 2 minutes, taken throughout the day, and they can be just as beneficial as long breaks. So for a lot of us, sitting in front of our computers, the knowledge work that we do, it can be sedentary and exhausting, both physically and mentally. And hours spent relentlessly in front of the screen or concentrating on one thing really can lead us to getting square eyes and brain drain, and that ruins our productivity. That then, in turn, leads us on to performing poorly on tasks, not because we've stopped paying attention to them, but because we begin to lose our focus and our performance starts to decline. And researchers at the University of Illinois have found that brief diversions from a task can dramatically improve our ability to focus for prolonged periods. And that's where micro breaks come in. We need micro breaks to be able to ease our bodies and reboot our brains. They can improve our ability to concentrate, to reduce workplace stress, and even increase our happiness because they bring a sense of calm. So spending time having that cuppa in the garden or a few minutes feeding the fish will do you wonders. Our thinking then also gets faster because we become much more relaxed. So what do they involve? Well, pretty much anything. The only rule for getting a good micro break in is that they've got to be short. So seconds to up to a couple of minutes, and they need to be voluntary. They are super easy to build into your day. So you just need to consciously take a little time and effort to do them. And what they don't do, of course, is replace the need for longer breaks and the rest that we actually need to properly repair and restore ourselves. But they do break up long periods of concentration and allow us to refocus through the day. So some examples of micro breaks can include these things here you see on the screen. You might be having a stretch. If you're going to do that, roll your shoulders to loosen any tension. Notice how that sensation makes you feel. Where are your knotty areas? Go and make a cup of tea. Watch a funny video clip. Maybe divert your attention. Spend a few minutes chatting or messaging with a coworker. Take time to really enjoy and notice your mid-morning snack. It can be as simple as that, as well as building in things like brief mindfulness exercises. And that leads us really nicely onto looking at some of the ways that we can recharge. And Anna is going to give you some really useful tips that you can do to recharge. And that's in turn going to help us all look after ourselves a bit better and avoid heading towards that dreaded burnout.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Nikki. Some really good information there. I think you'll all agree. So now we all know the importance of getting a good night's sleep, but sometimes we also need to be able to step back and re-energize during the day as well. So we'd really like to share with you a way in which you can recharge on the go. I remember when we said how signs of stress could manifest earlier. Well, wouldn't it be really nice during our stressful, fast-paced lives to have a super quick and effective way to recenter ourselves, improve our attention span, and actually just be able to focus on the present for a moment? Well, enter mindfulness. It's really easy to build into your day, and the great thing about it is that it fits really nicely into micro break too. Many of you may have heard of mindfulness practice, and some of you might even associate it with free spirits, Zen-like people, or perhaps you see it as having roots and belief systems that don't match your own, and that's okay. And in the West, its popularity can be traced back to somebody called Jon Kabat-Zinn. And he combined mindfulness's Eastern foundations with Western science to create a mindfulness-based stress reduction clinical program that was secular and accessible to Western audiences. So what does mindfulness mean to you? Would really like to hear from you. Do you practice it? A lot of people practice mindfulness in different ways. Do it when struggling to sleep? Yes, I also do that. So as we can see, mindfulness is about having moment by moment awareness of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And the idea is really to allow thoughts, feelings, and sensations to come and go without judgment or the need to do anything with them. So mindfulness practice enables you to have both mind and body in the same place at the same time, which then can help you to become calm and able to see and feel what is happening around you and within you with greater clarity. Now, mindfulness isn't for everybody because some people might find it just isn't for them. And for some people, a mindfulness practice can actually be quite challenging, or we simply find it just doesn't work for us. So we can practice it alone with the purpose of achieving a state of focused relaxation by allowing our minds to refocus on the present moment. When we dedicate ourselves to practicing mindfulness, it improves our well-being because it makes it easier to savor the pleasures in life as they occur, helping you to become more fully engaged in activities and creating capacity to deal with adverse or difficult events. And scientists have found that it can improve our physical health by helping to relieve stress, lower blood pressure, reduce chronic pain, and improve sleep. Now, some examples of organisations that use mindfulness include people like the US Navy SEALs and the UK Armed Forces, both of whom have placed great emphasis on mindfulness practice. And the British Army have an 8-week mindfulness course, which they've made available to the public. So if you're interested and you want to give it a try, so it is a free 8-week mindfulness course, which they've made available to you. And if you're going to give it a try, we do ask that you do please read their disclaimer on the front page before deciding to give it a go, because it specifies that anyone with experience of trauma, concerns about their mental or physical health should always consult with a medical professional before deciding whether to embark on the path with mindfulness training. So let's take a look at some of the benefits. Now, research has found that mindfulness can help relieve stress by helping you to regulate your emotions. So instead of seeing the negative consequences of feeling stressed, mindfulness offers you space to think differently about the stress itself, leading to better mood and a better ability to handle stress. It can help you to become more aware of your thoughts, helping you to step back from them and not taking them so literally. It can also help you to not immediately react to a situation. So instead, you take a moment to pause and use your calm, wise mind to come up with the best solution. It can also help you to become more aware and sensitive to the needs of your body. So you might find that you start to notice pains earlier and can then take appropriate action. But research tells us that the benefits really come with regular and sustained practice. And it doesn't have to be lengthy. It can be as little as 2 to 3 minutes done regularly rather than 10 minutes once a month. And the more you practice mindfulness, the more you will come to understand your thoughts, feelings, and sensations and how they influence each other, as well as your mood and the way you respond to the world. So how can we incorporate mindfulness into our day? Well, we can be mindful when eating. So is anyone here guilty of munching on their food whilst doing other things such as reading emails, sitting in front of the TV? I know I am, and I do it a lot. And sometimes I don't really appreciate what I've eaten. Now, the best way to practice mindful eating is by observing how the food makes you feel, thinking about how it looks, how does it smell, and try chewing more slowly as well. Think about, do you feel satisfied and full? Do you feel happy? Do you feel comforted? Do you feel nourished? Really engage your senses and control the food rather than it controlling you. Now, another way is to take a mindful walk. So mindful walking is a form of mindful movement, and you only need to do it 5 to 10 minutes. When you're out walking, try tuning into your environment, the sights and sounds around you, and really pay attention to your body, the lifting and falling of your foot. How does the ground feel beneath your feet? And spending time in nature has been shown to increase endorphins, which improve your mood. And another way is to wash the dishes, and that's right, I'm not joking. I don't particularly enjoy washing the dishes, but joking aside, doing it mindfully might just switch on senses that might not ordinarily come to the party. And research has shown that people who wash dishes mindfully reported a 27% decrease in nervousness and a 25% increase in mental inspiration. So how's that? Next time you find yourself at the kitchen sink washing the dishes, try focusing on the senses, the smell of the washing out liquid, the warmth of the water against your skin, the sights and the sounds. And whatever you do, we just ask that you try to be all there. And I'm now going to hand you over back to Nikki.
Thanks, Anna. And I think if ever there's a reason that we should do the dishes, there it probably is. So that's pretty much bringing us towards the end of today's session and the top tips that we've shared. And we hope that you've found some of those quite easy to build into your day, hopefully quite interesting, in how impactful some of these can be. Taking time for our self-care and to notice when we start to feel the burn of stress means we can take action to combat it before things escalate. And that means we're going to start to feel happier, healthier, and much more productive. And also, in terms of resources, don't forget what you've got available to you in your own service, and that you will have support from your line manager, from HR, from your colleagues. Tap into those people if you need to. There's also lots of information available via the Firefighters Charity, and having a look on their website, you'll see some signposts to some additional resources that can really help support mental well-being. I'd also thoroughly promote the Mind website. I think it's got some really good information for dealing with burnout whilst working from home, as well as some stress management tips. And if you're struggling to cope, and if you need to connect with someone now, there are services like Shout, which is a text service available 24/7 through giveusashout.org. Contact them or the Samaritans if you are in need of immediate help. So please don't struggle. You're not alone, and do reach out if you need some help. So before we go and before we finish talking, because you've heard us for nearly an hour now, and we've been rattling on, what are your key takeaways from today's session? What changes would you like to make for yourself or do differently in the future? Please, would you mind just sharing sort of maybe one thing that you might like to do differently going forward? Love myself more. Brilliant. And I think Lee said earlier about riding his motorcycle in the moment, taking micro breaks, as Joanne, thank you. It is much easier than you realise. It doesn't require big habit change. Andre says, taste the food more. And I think, Faye, that's a really good point as well. I am guilty of not eating till very late in the day, and then I'm feeling a bit rubbish. Laughter, forced and natural. Yep, your brain will be tricked into thinking good things are happening, John. Yeah, and don't feel bad about taking micro breaks. We're humans at the end of the day. We need these. We're not machines that work relentlessly. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I think you've got some really, really good things that you're sharing there. I hope that you'll be able to use some of these going forward. So as we finish up this session, then we'll just leave you with this last thought. If you feel burnout setting in, if you feel demoralised and exhausted, it is best, for the sake of everyone, to withdraw and restore yourself, because the point is to have a long-term perspective. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Anna. That was fantastic. I wish that teams would invent a big round of applause button, because I think you deserve one for that. That was absolutely fantastic. And really, if I may, just before we go to sort of questions, we've got another sort of 10 minutes if people want to stay and join us for that, really. So going back to the beginning, I think one thing that struck me there was just that statement about remembering that you've kept it all going. And I don't think we should forget that, because as I probably said in my introduction, I think everybody's had a different experience throughout the pandemic, and actually we shouldn't forget that we've kept normality going, whatever that is, and we've all tried our best. And I think that's something we should be kind to ourselves about. And again, sort of thank goodness for the virtual pub quizzes and Joe Wicks, who kept us all going during the pandemic. And in a strange way, I miss the virtual pub quizzes now. I'm not going back to a real one. I think that's it. That's the future. And I think your tips around the refueling, the re-energizing and recharging, I think that's really, really important. And I think as we got towards the end of the presentation, as Anna was saying, around the self-care, the mindfulness, taking time for the small things. And I think for me, perhaps the one thing to share, you asked what is the one thing you take away from today. For me, I think it's that remembering that self-care is not optional, and it's not something to feel guilty about. And it was really quite humbling to see people sharing their experiences in the chat bar, because ultimately this is about the shared human experience. And sometimes just knowing that you're not the only person experiencing those feelings and those doubts and that inner chatter that goes on, your inner dialogue, I think can be really, really powerful. And I think it was really quite humbling, I will say, to sort of see people sharing their experiences on there. And I think sometimes getting the conversation going and keeping the conversation going is just as important, isn't it? So thank you so much. So we've got some time now just for some questions or some conversations or comments, or anybody who wishes to join in. And how we would normally do this is, if you wouldn't mind just raising your hand, and I can invite you in if you've got any comments or anything that you want to say or ask to Nikki and Anna as we've got them here.
I suppose I was just thinking about how we can support and make some of those tips and tricks you shared more normal and acceptable within our teams, because I think everyone feels, a real obligation to keep pushing, and the pace of work seems to have driven up massively over the pandemic. So I suppose I'm thinking about how we can, just make it more normal and more acceptable for people to just say, I'm finishing this meeting 10 minutes early because, to give everyone a break, or if there's anything else that you guys would recommend.
Anna, did you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point about, finishing meetings early. I know in some organisations they're sort of making sure that people don't book back-to-back meetings. Also, another idea would be perhaps taking 5 minutes at the start of a meeting just to take a breath, just let everyone sort of gather into the room, as it were. I know we're all working virtually, but sort of, just take a breath, take a minute to just relax and sort of, get ready for that next meeting. It's really important to take breaks. That we don't need to be working online all the time. So I think it's sort of bringing up the conversation that everybody needs to take breaks and reminding each other.
As managers, as peers, it's really important that we just check in with each other. Maybe some of those catch-ups are just for a virtual coffee instead. Your brain gets a chance to slow down because you're focusing on other things. I think depending on how services are approaching sort of the return to the new normal, there are other things that we can do. So if you've got Skype or Teams or any sort of conferencing software that shows your availability online, not to feel like that's got to be like a green I'm available all the time as well. So how we can communicate that down into some of our teams. It's okay if you appear to be away from your desk for 15 minutes, or if you need to go and do the school run, that's cool, go and do it, because we've got the flexibility. We know you're going to catch up later. So probably a lot about trust as well, I would say, but I think it's probably a constant nudge.
Yeah, and another idea, it's what some people are doing as well. They're having walking meetings. So, even though we're having these virtual meetings, some people are actually sort of taking their phones with them and going for a walk and having a meeting. And that's another idea to sort of, to be able to get outside. I know you're working at the same time, but just to be outside, a different environment.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to do. It doesn't all have to be remote. It doesn't all have to be face to face. We don't have to be rushing around from pillar to post.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Faye. And I think it's an important point to remember. I think Teams has increased the pace, hasn't it? And I think that expectation, that always on, that always available, that always next. And I think where we probably, one of the unintended consequences of Teams is normally we would get a walk between our meetings, or we would, inevitably, stop and chat at the end of the meeting or before. And of course, that's not happened, has it, by and large, in the last year? And I think, again, that shared human contact, very often that's the time when people do get the downtime, get the micro breaks, and actually have a laugh and a joke. And of course, that's not always something that we can do when we're at home on our own, is it? So again, it's something to be mindful of. And just picking up on some of the comments in the chat bar there, of course, Faye's made the point there that we do check-ins at our weekly team meetings, which is nice. And again, it might just be something that we might want to consider, building on what you've presented today around just doing those check-ins and making sure that everybody's okay and asking if you're all right.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's all right to say no, actually. I'm struggling a bit, which, of course, we all have a tendency to say yes, don't we? So
it's corridor conversations, isn't it? Hey, how are you? You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. You okay? Yeah, I'm good. And really underneath the surface, it's not always the case, is it?
Of course. Well, I think there were no further questions unless anybody has anything else that they wish to ask either Nikki or Anna. And I think really just on behalf of the NFCC, the EDI board, I'd just like to thank you both very warmly for your time today. I think it's been a fantastic insight. And I think we've all got something from that. We all recognise things in there in ourselves, and we can take things away and hopefully be better for it. So I really do thank you for that, and thank you for your time.
If you want to get involved in Lunch and Learns moving forward, whether you want to present something, whether you want to put a subject forward, we'd love to hear from anybody that has a passion or would like to share some stuff with us.
Lovely, thank you. That's great. And it'd be remiss of me not to ask Faye as well, if Faye's got anything else to add just from an NFCC perspective.
No, nothing specific for me. Just a massive thanks to the three of you for facilitating and running this session. It's been, as I said in the chat, it's been really, really valuable, and I hope that everyone has been able to take away at least something that's going to improve their ability to cope with stress and burnout. So yeah, thank you so much.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
And on that note, we shall bid you a warm goodbye. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. It's been lovely to have you along. And thanks again to Nikki and Anna. All the best to you all. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
I hope you have found this podcast informative and it has given you insight. All Lunch and Learn sessions are available at www.ukfrs.com.